Welcome to this presentation on the Virginia Autism Council Autism Competencies for the 2020 Revised Edition. We're very excited to have Daniel Irwin from the Virginia Department of Education and Sharon Jones from the Virginia Department of Education's TTAC at VCU here to present with us. Thank you both for being here. The Virginia Autism Council was established in 2001, and we're an interagency council of autism stakeholders. We have family members, self-advocates, service and support agencies across the lifespan. We meet regularly to share, network, and identify ways to improve services for individuals with autism throughout Virginia. You can see the mission of VAC, and so we envision individuals with autism to fully participate in every aspect of society with the assistance of trained and professionally trained and knowledgeable professionals and paraprofessionals and family and community members. That's one of the reasons that we came about to develop the VAC competencies. We work in subgroups on the VAC, and we also work on some things like we develop resources, we have this webinar series, and in the past we've hosted many trainings. But we found that these days it's really hard to do some specific VAC-sponsored trainings.
So today we kind of, it's part of the introduction, talked about what we're going to do related to the new competencies. And so the purpose behind these competencies is, well, there's multiple purposes behind it. One is, and kind of the main one, is to guide personnel development of professionals and paraprofessionals that support individuals with autism and their families from early intervention to adult services. And so it's a wide-ranging list of competencies and skills that we're looking for that have proven through evidence bases to be effective for students and individuals with autism. We focus on assessment of the individual needs and program planning. This isn't a diagnostic tool by any stretch. This really is looking at areas of programmatic or individual development, individual being those caregivers, teachers, job coaches, support personnel, to be able to support individuals on the spectrum. And it includes competencies that are specific, unique, and critical to successfully serving individuals with autism. And so as we go through, there's several different categories that we're going to cover related to general autism competencies, social skills competencies, behavior competencies, environmental structure, and things of that nature. But those skills and knowledge that are outlined in the competencies are based in the evidence and have been updated based on new evidence that we've gotten over the past several years.
Okay, so this is a look at the, how about that look at the competencies? As one flat document, but it is packed full of lots of good information. This document, the skill competencies, was originally developed in 2010. And you will see when you go into the document, the 2-page list of credits to all of the national and state experts in autism. There were many focus groups. There were many work groups. And finally, in 2010, that first document was developed. There was a lot of research that went into it. There were references that you will see listed, as well as references to the DSM. And then it was quite an undertaking, I must tell you. And then, so we decided, oh gosh, 10 years later, we really need to update the language. We need to do lots of different updates to it. So we had a smaller committee of the VAC that participated in the revision of the competencies. And we also had the support of VCU ACE. And so Sue Palco and Taryn Traylor, I believe, Taryn, you are on the line today. We want to thank them both for their participation in the review. So, we reviewed and updated the document. The VAC has had a chance to provide their ideas and suggestions and edits. So now we're ready to roll it out to you all. So excited.
Sharon, I can't remember who's doing this one, but I'll take it if you.
Yeah,
if
you are.
Okay. So there were a couple of things that, as we started reviewing the previous document from 2010, that we noticed just some broad areas for improvement for this document. And so one of those things is the consolidated categories. So when we look at the competencies, we're looking at different levels of individuals who are providing supports. And so Those individuals range from paraprofessionals, those that don't sort of have a teaching license or aren't credentialed in sort of those typical ways, all the way to folks that might be making big decisions related to students with autism. So we're calling them, now I can't remember. We removed one of the categories just because there was so much overlay and uh, similarity between the two, just to simplify the document a little bit.
Daniel, we
Yes.
consolidated the Master Professional Direct Service Provider with the Advanced Degree Program.
Thank you. We had difficulty sort of delineating between the two, or really coming up with a definition of each that didn't sort of cross over. So thank you, Sharon. The other big theme here was, as we looked at some of the language in the previous iteration, we noticed that the language didn't really focus on building that independence. And so when we looked at supports, the previous document really focused on the supports that students needed and how to provide those supports. In this one, we're really trying to shape the language to indicate that those supports are in place, but students and individuals need to learn to access those on their own so that they can become independent and not rely on someone else to provide that level of support. So that might include learning how to use their own schedule, communication systems, and that kind of thing. We also increased kind of the focus on data collection, making sure that when professionals, paraprofessionals are providing instruction and support, that it's systematic. And so through data collection, we can make good informed instruction or intervention decisions. Again, focusing towards independence and really socially relevant skills. We added some additional language related to making sure that interventions and goals are person-centered, and that we're building self-determination skills within individuals so that they have a voice in their life and can make the decisions on their own. We added a glossary of terms just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we're being really specific about what we're talking about. And of course, over the past 10 years, there's been an increase in research and an increase in what has been found to be evidence-based. And so we wanted to make sure that those practices, those strategies, and that information was all updated in this version of the document.
Okay, so there are two versions of the competencies, and one is the one that we're going to talk about today, and that's the skill competencies for professionals and paraprofessionals in Virginia, supporting individuals with autism across the lifespan. So that is, across the lifespan. And as Daniel said, decades of research have really supported the development of this particular document. And so there's a lot of research that was reviewed as we developed these documents. The other document that you may be interested in is the Virginia Adult and Adolescent Skill Competencies. And that has a little PD tracker with it. So that document has been updated and revised by the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And they use those competencies in training and staff development. So we're excited that others have taken those on and are using them in that way. If you go to the website and you will not see that document uploaded to the website. We had to take it down. We're working on accessibility, and we want to make sure that we have it the right document uploaded there. Plus, we have not been making copies like we used to. Just the back budget is low. So we just have not been making competency copies of many of those documents there. But you will find both of those. And then attached to that adult and adolescent skill competencies is a PD tracker or professional development tracker. And that's intended to be used by individuals to keep track of their own professional development. And it's sort of a self-assessment of your evolving skills and abilities, and movement in those areas will help you with acquiring all of those competencies. So it's a nice document. And if you're interested in it, we can share it with you.
So I mentioned this before, but the reason these are here is to really help professionals and families across the lifespan who are providing support for individuals on the spectrum to really have a common language about what skills are necessary and where they can find additional opportunities for professional development or knowledge or build their knowledge base. And so it's really to help identify areas of need for professional development and guide training and staff development for direct service staff that serve individuals with autism. So it provides that framework and offers the opportunity for organizations to really kind of look in, do some self-assessment and really figure out where those needs are. It's designed to guide the development of person-centered services and support. So as I mentioned before, we really looked at building in that self-determination piece as well as language to promote independence in individuals. And so I hope that is conveyed through a lot of the language in these competencies. And it guides the development of university-based classes to augment existing programs and to serve as a framework for incorporating into existing programs of universities and others, preparing paraprofessionals and professionals to build their programs. So in Virginia, we don't have a license, teaching license that's specific to autism. But there are coursework programs that individuals who are licensed can get a certificate in. And those programs are based on and meet the requirements of these competencies. Additionally, these competencies can be built into programs that are already in existence, just to make sure that in teacher prep programs that teachers are learning and developing these skills and competencies along the way. So I just feel a bit redundant here, but again, this is really designed for caregivers and managers and those folks who might be supervising individuals who are serving individuals with autism to identify needs for professional development, to guide development of a program that would strictly address the needs of people who are working with children and adults with autism, guide development of university-based classes to augment existing programs, serve as a framework for building in some of these competencies into existing programs, and guide training and staff development for direct service staff that serve individuals with autism. Sharon, are you talking about the university?
I think you were going to do that, Daniel.
Okay. So when universities wish to offer this autism certificate program, like I said before, it may be embedded into already existing programs. So if a teacher is going through and working towards their adaptive teaching license, these competencies might be built into that program so that when they leave, they can leave with their license as well as the autism certificate. But in order to meet the requirements, there must be instruction in 80% or more of the knowledge and skill statements that are outlined in the competencies. There's got to be 9 to 12 credit hours of instruction and inclusion of field experiences for a minimum of 15 hours. That could be observations, practicum, internships, or things that are typically part of a teacher training program. As we go through, and I apologize for the blurriness of this, but this gives you kind of a visual of what the competency document looks like. There are two different types of competencies. One is knowledge-based, and that's really what designed to increase folks' knowledge about certain aspects of autism and services and supports. The other is skill-based, and so most of the things in this competency document do reflect skill-based needs. So the competencies really aren't about being able to recite some knowledge. It's really about being able to implement and demonstrate and apply that knowledge in authentic settings.
Mm-hmm. And Daniel mentioned already that the skill areas, you will see, and that if you go back to that document, that Daniel, can you flip back to that document? You will see, even though it's a really blurry copy, you can see on the left side, there are knowledge-based and skill-based competencies. And then on the right side, you can see 3 columns, and there are check marks next to each of those columns that mean that that particular professional or paraprofessional should have an understanding of that particular competency. So then if you can move forward, Daniel, we have 3 different areas, and this is where Daniel described how we blended some of these areas during the review, but there is one column that addresses paraprofessionals and direct service staff, and that really refers to anyone who's directly supporting infants, children, or adults in a paraprofessional manner. They could be respite workers or providers. They could be assistants in educational settings, staff in community-based programs or residential support programs. So anybody in that sort of paraprofessional role. The next area is the professional direct services staff. And so that's the way it was originally defined as a direct service professional within their first to third years of practice. They might be new teachers, counselors, psychologists, therapists, and others. Including those that are very experienced in their profession, but may not have as much knowledge about autism. And then that third level is the master professional or program developer specialist. And those are individuals who have pursued additional certification or degrees and have extensive experience in training and supporting individuals with autism. And so because they might have expertise in one particular area does not necessarily indicate expertise or specialization in all areas. So you might be an OT who's really has a specific certification in sort of the sensory area, but that doesn't mean that you might be an expert in all areas of autism. So additionally, these people in that third tier, or that third level, might also be responsible for designing and providing professional development for their programs. So Daniel mentioned that this is a good resource for those folks. And you can see that there are 8 competency areas. I won't go over them because you can clearly see them here, but these are the primary areas that we felt were particularly important for meeting skills for working with our folks with autism.
So let's get into them. The first is general autism competency statements. And so actually what I'm going to do is just for a second, I'm going to pull over try not to cover that up. Hold on. Here's a clearer version of what the skills competency document looks like. So this is for the general autism competencies. And so the first statement is a knowledge statement, and it's organized kind of this way, where we've got a knowledge statement, and then underneath that, we've got the skill competencies that really inform and round out that knowledge statement. So the first general autism competency statement is understands the characteristics and diagnosis of autism as defined by the most recent version of the DSM and the Department of Education. And so one of those things that we need to consider is that a diagnosis of autism doesn't necessarily mean an eligibility or being found eligible under autism for special education services. So one of the things we would expect all personnel under this category to be able to do is define the defining characteristics of autism, what it looks like. So the communication impacts, patterns of stereotypical behavior, socialization, social skill development, and the impact that it has on the individual. We'd expect everyone to be able to do that. We'd expect everyone to be able to kind of look at other characteristics of individuals with autism that might not be the defining characteristics or the things that might find them eligible for special education services or a diagnosis, but really looking at some of the sensory processing, the motor skills, the theory of mind, imitation, those kind of things, as well as cognitive characteristics. So difficulty with executive functioning, attending, the abstract thinking, and problem solving. Additionally, we expect people who are knowledgeable about individuals with autism to have some awareness and knowledge to be able to describe typical stages of child development so that they can recognize where those deficits are. Also under kind of the general understanding that being able to describe kind of the continuum of autism spectrum disorders as it's outlined, and working again with family, teaching self-advocacy and awareness of autism. So some of that self-determination and understanding strengths and weaknesses or areas of growth that come with that. And then educating and coaching peers, so that individual's peers, to interact appropriately and effectively. So giving them some strategies to be able to effectively interact with an individual with autism. The second knowledge piece is understanding the impact of common medical issues, so things like seizure disorders, chronic otitis media, gastrointestinal issues, sleep disruptions, and some of the treatments that go along with that. So most of these, we reserve the skill competencies for professional and master professional. We don't expect paraprofessionals or direct service staff to assess or communicate critical health related information to team members. We wouldn't expect them to develop and coach on the use of communication tools. Now, we want direct service personnel to be able to use communication tools, but it's not their role to coach and develop those strategies. The other knowledge piece of this is understanding the implications of those dual diagnoses, which is really autism and any other diagnosis from the DSM. So part of this is listing behaviors that could indicate the presence of an additional mental health diagnosis. Again, this is not something we'd expect paraprofessionals to do or direct service staff, but the professionals and master professionals, we would expect that they'd be able to do that. Discussing concerns and shares observations with family and caregiver. Typically, we rely on teachers, on master professionals to do a lot of the communication between school and home, and I'm speaking from a school perspective. Now, one that we would expect everyone to be able to do is implement behavioral and mental health recommendations given to a team by specialists. So this might include a behavior intervention plan. It might include gathering data for a functional behavior assessment or teaching some communication strategies, but we'd expect everyone across the board to be able to do that. And then being able to share behavioral changes to medical professionals or other professionals who are supervising that individual. The next, oh, there's that slide. All the things I just said, I forgot to take these out, Sharon. The next is looking at environmental structure and visual support competency statements. And this is one we really took a hard look at when we were revising the document, because there had been some update in the research, and there had been just new information out. This is also the area where we really one of the areas where we really focused on ensuring that our language was promoting the idea that these supports, these environmental structures, these visual supports, are designed in a way not just to support the student or the individual now, but designed in a way that would allow them to access and utilize those supports independently, or through the use of those supports, we can teach independent skills. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of move through. So the first knowledge piece under the environmental structure piece is understanding the importance of environmental structure, and that it provides a setting that is safe, structured, and promotes independence. And so basically this means that we're providing a safe environment that's free of hazards, right? Like we've got an environment that where the student or individual can thrive, and we're making sure that it's safe, first and foremost. A positive climate that promotes respect for the individual, structures the physical environment and material so that they can complete activities and routines independently. A lot of this comes from the APERS, the Autism Program Environment Rating Scale. That's where a lot of this language comes from, which we use in classrooms that are supporting students on the spectrum. Additionally, we've got some statements in there that looks at providing spaces for the individual to engage in quiet, calming, or sensory-based activities, and providing instruction on recognizing the need. So the original set of competencies really had that skill competency, that there'd be a space for the individual to engage in a quiet, calming, or sensory-based activity. What we added in this iteration is that individuals are providing instruction so that the student or the client or whoever can learn to recognize the need for those things, right? Like we don't want those things to be available contingent on either a teacher or a job coach or a direct service provider saying they're available. We want the individual to be able to recognize the need, communicate that need, and then be able to access that space or that activity on their own. And so that's one example of how we really tried to build in language that focuses on building skills rather than simply providing a support in the moment. The second is understands and teaches a variety of visual support strategies to promote comprehension and independence. So we're using evidence-based practices, and we want everyone from paraprofessionals to master professionals to use these practices, things like modeling, prompting, shaping, cueing, reinforcement, to teach the individual how to use the visual support. It's not just there as a support, it's about how to use it. Designs and teaches meaningful visual supports and strategies that are going to move or have the ability to transfer into other life settings. So as students move from middle school into high school, if they move from preschool into kindergarten, we want those supports to move with them, especially as they leave high school and enter the job force, the workforce, and adult life in the community. Making sure that those supports we're building aren't only applicable, again, where they are, but will be effective and applicable and reasonable in the settings they wish to go into. We're looking for everyone to teach a variety of visual supports and strategies, using daily schedules that are personalized to the individual. So visual schedules that are meaningful, that are usable, again, so that they can learn those independent skills. And one of the skills we've got kind of specified to professionals and master professionals is that they're coaching paraprofessionals and families to implement visual supports and strategies. We know that providing some didactic instruction or some reading material on some of these strategies can help people develop their knowledge. But what research has shown time and time again is that it takes practice, it takes feedback and coaching to really be able to develop these strategies and develop fidelity in implementation of these strategies. And then the third is understands how to measure progress and evaluate the effectiveness of strategies. So we want everyone to be able to observe behaviors using objective measures and criteria, recognize trends in data. So we know that for many students and many individuals, it takes quite a bit of repetition in order to develop new skills or develop increased independence in a skill. And so it's important that professionals are able to look at data and recognize trends that the student or client is making progress or not making progress, and being able to communicate that so that the professional, master professional, can make adjustments in the intervention or the instruction. Using data to guide decisions, as I just said. So that's the environmental, structure, and visual supports. You'll see that as we move forward, kind of at the end of each of these, there's a data component because that does a number of things. One, it exemplifies the importance of collecting data, but it also, I think it solidifies kind of the idea that we need to be collecting this data so that we're ensuring that we're promoting independence and not kind of building prompt dependency or dependence on another individual. Sharon, is this you?
That one's you, Daniel. Sorry.
I'm just going to keep talking then.
Just gonna keep talking, yeah.
So the comprehensive instructional programming competency really looks at 4 different things. Understand that the individual understands how to assess the strengths and opportunities for growth as a means to determine person-centered goals, which includes identifying formal assessments. Many of these, sorry, I'm just take a step back. Many of these, at least in this first knowledge statement, are reserved for professional and direct staff, as well as master professional or program developers, because they really look at setting up an instructional program in general. We'd expect paraprofessional direct service staff to be able to implement these things, but a lot of this is about designing those comprehensive instructional programs. So things like identifying and using the appropriate formalized assessments to evaluate strengths, needs, interest, and learning style, informal assessment tools, soliciting information from all members of the individual's team. So we really need to make sure that we're addressing not just families, but folks in the community and those people that have relationships with the individual, to make sure that we're getting good information and comprehensive information about the individual. Sharing evaluation results with the family and other professionals and paraprofessionals. And then one of the big ones that we constantly focus on at the Department of Ed is developing standard-based goals and objectives that are based on the present level of performance of the student, that the goals are observable, measurable, and achievable, that they're age relevant and age appropriate, that they include academic, social, and adaptive goals, and they're reflective of the desires of the individual and the family. I'm not going to read all of these. There's a bunch of skill competencies that are under this first knowledge competency, but it's about goal development. It's about planning for transition supports by incorporating student profiles, again, based on interest, long-term goals, so that when those big transitions happen across the lifespan, early intervention to preschool, preschool to elementary, high school to post-secondary, that the plans are comprehensive and are planning for those transitions. Describing the need for the provision of intensive and explicit instruction based on those goals. And then really looking at designing an ongoing portfolio of an individual's needs and interests to support those transitions. So that the next person who is going to be taking care or providing instruction or supporting that student really has an understanding of where they are, what their strengths are, and gives that student voice or that individual's voice into some of the future planning. The second is understanding and implements the universal design for learning framework to plan for learner variability when we're looking at instructional methods and strategies. So identifying the goals that allow high expectations and access to quality learning experiences. And part of this is making sure that there are supports in place and instructions being provided so that students, again, I'm coming from a school perspective, has access to the general curriculum and students without disabilities. Setting expectations high, evaluating instructional demands within the current learning or work environment to reduce and eliminate barriers, understanding and implementing evidence-based strategies to address the goals and selecting those practices, providing individualized interventions through a variety of formats. So we'd expect paraprofessionals, direct service staff, all three categories to be able to provide that instruction, whether it's independent work activities, small group activities, peer mediated, one-on-one, home-based, community-based instruction, and utilize supports that meet their needs academically, socially, and adaptive, promoting independence and functional communication, functional social interactions, and the development of life skills across all domains. The third, under comprehensive instructional programming, is understand and implements evidence-based strategies, promising practices, and supports to address individual goals. Again, when we're talking about utilizing these evidence-based practices, we're expecting all levels of support staff to be able to do this. While the professional and master professional design those strategies, the paraprofessional direct service staff should be able to implement with fidelity. And so providing age-relevant individualized reinforcement, we need people to do that. Reinforcement's very important in behavior change. Implementing strategies and supports across all settings. So we know that as students get older in school, there's more opportunity for work-based learning experiences. There's more opportunities for community-based instruction. And so we need individuals to be able to implement strategies, not just in the classroom, but understanding that the community is a classroom and the workplace is a classroom, and those strategies need to carry over and stay consistent across different environments and activities. Planning and communicating and coaching family members in some of these strategies so that there's continuity between school, work, home, and what those supports look like. Again, that facilitates the development of independent skills in a number of domains when there is that consistency of support. Um, and again, there's a coaching component to this as well. So we'd expect professionals and master professionals to be able to coach other professionals and families to implement components of an individualized intervention program based on those settings and activities. And the fourth one here in comprehensive instructional programming is understanding how to measure progress and evaluate effectiveness of strategies and instruction. If we don't know how to do that, then we don't know if we're making progress or if the thing we're doing is causing the progress. So a lot of these are reserved for the professional or specialist, or excuse me, master professional. But being able to utilize it, long story short, being able to collect and utilize data that's informing our interventions or our instruction or the supports we're providing. And so developing database training protocols to support, train, and retrain paraprofessionals, direct service staff as needed. That's very meta here. We're talking about developing those professionals and master professionals, developing a data system for ensuring that paraprofessionals understand and can utilize the competencies, but making sure we're including the individual as an active participant and contributor in their program planning. That includes their IEP. That might include their VR plan or with their case manager with DARS. And then, yeah, I guess that's kind of it for that one. Sharon, I do believe this is you now.
Daniel. So this is, by now you have probably sort of recognized some of the themes and the components in all of these areas there. And so you can tell that under each of these instructional areas or skill areas, there is a component that involves understanding the skill area. There's an assessment component. There's a development of the program component. There is program implementation, and then the evaluation piece. And under this area and the others that I'm going to talk about too, we know that the paraprofessional is certainly checked off under the understanding of the skill and program implementation and evaluation. And so those are key areas for our paraprofessionals in those areas there. So with communication, I'm just going to digress just for a moment because we all feel this is a really critical area for our individuals with autism. And several years ago, the Department of Education and the AT Network did a survey, and we found about AAC, knowledge and skills and other training needs that were that people identified. And we found that many people just do not feel comfortable with their knowledge of AAC and do not understand the connection between behaviors and communication. So some of these skill areas definitely reflect building on those particular areas. And the DOE and the AT Network are very focused on the goal of having anyone who needs an AA system to have access to the appropriate communication system and to graduate with an appropriate communication system that will lead them into, their adult lives. And we know that when they're in school, this is a really critical time for them to be able to have access to, trained professionals and services that do not cost money in order to identify their AAC needs and develop an AAC system. So in this area, you can see, I'm going to do this a little bit differently from Daniel. There are 3 knowledge areas that we want to emphasize here. And the first one is understanding the purpose and functions of communication and their impact on day-to-day experiences. The second one is understanding a variety of strategies to increase an individual's communication skills and their abilities. And there are lots of strategies that our professionals and paraprofessionals can pull on. And the third knowledge area is to understand how to measure progress and evaluate the effectiveness of communication strategies and systems. So under those 3 areas are some skills like using informal and formal assessment tools, excuse me, to analyze both receptive and expressive communication. So we're looking at verbal, nonverbal skills, the content, speech, semantics, and pragmatics, all of those things. And then to determine the function of the behaviors, if it's to request, to comment, to question, maybe to negate something, and the frequency of communication across all of the life environments looking at the form of communication, whether it's verbal, gestures, visuals, any other type of AAC system that they are needing, and assessing the need for an augmentative communication system which is very important there. Of course, using a collaborative team approach to solicit information, and within those team, anyone who supports or works with that individual provides consultation, the family members, extended family members, anyone that this individual spends time with. It's important to engage everyone there. Design and implement a meaningful communication program and strategies to teach communication. And that's a really, really critical piece there. Supporting the development of receptive and expressive communication within the context of daily schedules and activities, teaching our individuals with autism how to communicate for a variety of reasons to a variety of people and in a variety of settings. And then the coaching piece there, they're coaching paraprofessionals, professionals, community members, and families to implement the communication program. Then there's that data piece that Daniel had mentioned before too, using data and ongoing assessments to modify strategies as needed to promote those communication skills in a variety of settings. And sometimes that's something that's tough to implement there. So, and then of course, the assessment and revising communication programs and systems to match the individual's changing needs. And we know that communication needs change across the lifespan. And so the communication systems should then change, including the vocabulary that the individual has access to across the years. So that's kind of in a little bit of a nutshell what the communication piece covers. Daniel? We'll go to the social skills area. And again, there are 3 knowledge statements under social skills. One is understanding the social challenges associated with autism and how to assess for intervention planning. There's that assessment piece. Understanding appropriate strategies to improve and enhance an individual's social skills, and understanding how to measure progress and evaluate the effectiveness of social skills strategies. So some of the skills that I kind of pulled out that fall under those 3 areas, or one of each of those 3 areas, is the skill of explaining how social challenges impact the individual's life, assessing social skills across environments, and assess skills related to emotional regulation related to social interactions. Assessing skills related to social reciprocity, that could be joint attention, perspective taking, sharing, turn taking. Again, assessing play and leisure skills. Then in the goal development, developing social skills goals and objectives that are functional, appropriate, observable, and measurable. And then the flexible piece there is creating opportunities throughout the day and across environments to promote positive social skills. And then, of course, the coaching piece falls into coaching the individual on how to interact for a variety of reasons with a variety of people and in a variety of settings, how to sort of generalize those skills. And then we talked about, we had some conversations about the coaching the individual about appropriate behavior for different social contexts and relationships across settings, such as interacting with strangers and those intimate social relationships too, and how important the bullying piece is in today's, in our society today. So that was also embedded in one of the skill areas. So, and then again, the data piece, we want our folks to be able to observe and record social behaviors using objective measures, criteria, and data collection tools. So then again, of course, to make those changes to the program based on the data that's been collected. So that's kind of social skills. Daniel, you want to add anything to that? I know that's a love of yours.
No, I think you said it, Sharon. I think part of it is the ability for people to adapt. I mean, I think one of their instruction, their support, their observation, because social skills is so nuanced. It is so environment and individually specific, that we really do look for that generalization of people to kind of recognize and be able to support social skills in a variety of environments and settings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And I don't have my notes. Is this me or you?
It's you.
Oh, good.
This
This is my other thing that I like.
Yeah.
So behavior competencies, the first big knowledge statement is understanding factors that influence behavior and the components of behavior analysis. So antecedents, behaviors, consequences, so that we can look objectively at what's happening at the behaviors that are occurring or not occurring, and then how to provide positive supports and intervention to support those things. And so um, running theme throughout is that collaboration with other team members and individuals to address it. But this one gets more, this one again identifies the strengths and interests and preferences that are reassessed on an ongoing basis. Um, and then we really get into some specifics regarding the functional behavior assessment process and strategies that individuals might and should be able to use. So looking at direct observations, structured ABC, data collection, um, being able to analyze new data and provide meaningful interpretations and hypotheses about why a behavior might be occurring or not occurring. And looking at individualized multi-component behavior intervention plans to address a variety of deficits or excesses. So identifying setting event and antecedent interventions, so things we can change ahead of time or before the behavior occurs to prevent it from occurring in the first place. Identifying appropriate and functional replacement, coping, and skills, replacement skills for the behavior, schedules of reinforcement and differential reinforcement for appropriate behavior. And again, data collections kind of comes as part of that. So that's kind of reserved for the professional, master professional, but we would expect paraprofessionals and everyone across the board to be able to implement all components of behavior intervention plan with consistency in a variety of complex environments under natural circumstances. And so school is one of those places where it's not, it's natural for the time and it's natural for kids to be in school. That's their job. But we really need to look at how to make sure that paraprofessionals and individuals who are supporting folks on the spectrum are able to generalize their skills to support in the community, in the workplace, and that kind of thing. Again, where the student wishes to be in the future. The other knowledge competency is understand how to evaluate the effectiveness of a behavior plan reliably and effectively. So back to data collection, right? Back to being able to look at progress, looking at individuals' data and make decisions and make assumptions about the changes they're seeing. So evaluating data, develop and executing plans. And again, that collaborative piece is such a good, strong running theme through all of these competencies that we're able to communicate with other team members and family members to develop effective programs for kids and adults.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to the sensory integration development, and we made some changes in this particular area. Before it was called sensory motor development, and so we added the integration piece, and you can see that there are three knowledge areas under that: understanding the sensory systems, sensory processing and integration, and sensory motor development. And we targeted also the paraprofessional in this area too, because we felt like, the paraprofessional spends so much time with these individuals with autism. They really need to have a deep understanding of how their sensory systems impact their behavior and their acquisition of certain skills. So that's an area that we wanted everyone to have a good understanding of, and then understanding the implications or influence of sensory needs when developing a comprehensive plan. And of course, we have more of the master professional who does some of the assessments with that, and then everyone else really having, the paraprofessional does not play a role so much in developing the planning here. As Daniel had mentioned that before too. So, and then the third knowledge is understanding how to measure progress and evaluate the effectiveness of strategies. So some of the key skills that we pulled out here to share with you guys, of course, is to describe the seven senses, which is visual, auditory, oral, olfactory, tactile, proprioceptive, and vestibular senses, and the varying patterns of sensory modulation, including over responsivity and under responsivity, and having an understanding of that. And then describing the relationship between sensory integration, motor systems, and behavior. For example, demonstrating stereotypical behavior such as rocking or hand flapping or triggering flight or fight or freeze responses. So that's something important to really have an understanding there. Describing the relationship between sensory integration and functional performance in academic and daily activities. So they're focusing on how they are participating in groups and independent tasks, their organization skills, literacy and math, work skills, play and leisure skills, and how the sensory system has an impact on how well those skills are acquired. Describing the relationship between sensory integration and motor planning and coordination, and understanding the implications or influences of sensory needs when developing a comprehensive plan. Identifying those behaviors that might indicate the need for sensory processing assessment. And again, we rely on our whole team, on the full team, to communicate together, and that's written into the competencies too. And then describing those relationships between sensory integration, motor systems, and behavior again. And then, of course, developing that sensory integration plan. Again, the master professional would have a role in that. We often rely on our OTs or others with very specialized knowledge in that sensory area to support us in the development of that. And then coaching paraprofessionals, professionals, and families on how to implement the sensory motor intervention plan. And then, of course, the data piece, which is documentation. So, and making changes as needed to the plan. So updating those sensory assessments when and if it's needed, and recognizing when it's time to do those updates. So that's the sensory piece. And then we only have one final area, and that is independence. And Daniel talked a great deal about independence and how this area really focuses on self-determination and providing opportunities to hear the student's voice and honor their preferences, interests, and their strengths. Here, the knowledge areas were understanding skills needed for independence and how to assess skills for intervention planning. The second one was understanding and implements a variety of evidence-based strategies to increase independence and generalization of skills, understanding a variety of strategies to increase an individual's access to general curriculum in the least restrictive environment. And then the fourth one is understanding how to measure progress and evaluate the effectiveness of strategies. So there are many new tools that have been developed to really help us give students a voice, and utilizing those tools and understanding those tools as part of the process. And then just having that mindset to really honor their preferences, their interest, and their strengths. So we want our folks to be able to understand and utilize these assessments and tools to determine those preferences, interests, and strengths, and work and collaborate in developing goals, involving their students in that process as well. So understanding those informal and formal assessment tools, engaging all of the members of the team, including those that might even be outside the team, with that you don't often have as much contact with. But the skill says solicit information from all members of the individual's team, including family members, developing goals and interventions that include the student's voice, strength, and preferences. And then, of course, that plan development, developing that intervention plan based on individual needs and long-term post-secondary goals. And Daniel referenced that in the Applied Studies project and all the work that we're all doing there. So, and then there's the data collection piece. Most of all, the trend is listen to the individual with autism and respect their interests and preferences is sort of the overall overarching goal there. So I think that's independence. Anything to add to that, Daniel?
No, I don't think so.
We hope this is making some sense. We know we've had to do a lot of sort of reading, but we want to be accurate in how we're describing the skills. And it is a long document.
It is, and it's a lot to kind of review and digest, but I think kind of just thinking about what to do next, if you were to walk out of here with something. It would be to kind of review those and do a bit of a self-assessment to really identify maybe areas where you have some strengths, where you have some interest in growing or learning more about, and identify those areas. For those of you that maybe manage staff or train staff, um, this can be a really good tool to kind of objectively be able to look at and kind of I wouldn't say evaluate, but to give some backbone to any professional development you think staff ought to engage in, and give them the opportunity, right? So we're always trying to find an individual's voice to help folks stay motivated and set goals, and advance professionally, personally, whatever. So giving staff and employees the opportunity to look through and see where their areas of strength or need are. And if you're a manager of a program or you're a school administrator or whatever, really being able to use these competencies to look programmatically at where areas of improvement could be, and then areas for professional development.
Mhm. And Daniel, I
Yeah.
think you probably already mentioned this too, but this document was not really designed as an evaluation tool, but much more of a self-assessment tool.
Yes. Yeah. Um, So if you're looking for them, they're up on the VAC website now, which is exciting. We are working on an accessible version. The version that's there now is not. We apologize that the accessible version is not ready yet, but it is on the way. So check back if that is something you need. And do we have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, or otherwise?
We're so excited that they are posted to the VAC website. And if you can't remember the VAC website, you can Google search Virginia Autism Council, and then you can just go to the competencies area, and it's under the resources area. So we're thrilled and excited that they are now posted. And we really appreciate your participation in the webinar today. And we thank Amanda and the rest of the VAC for having us come and talk to you all and for supporting these lunch and learn sessions. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.